Hi everybody, welcome back to the tutorial series on the fan. My name is Matt, Cryptic if you prefer, and today we're going to be getting the fan into Substance Painter and texturing it, and then exporting it and getting it back into Maya. A couple of things to note here when you're starting off. One, make sure your scene is organized. You want to make sure that you have named all your objects and they are all grouped into one specific area. You can see here I got my fan and I have all my objects named. We did that in the past tutorial, so I'm not going to go over how to do it again, but now we're going to prep for Substance Painter. Future Matt here. If you don't have access to Substance Painter and you are doing this tutorial just with the Maya settings that we set up in the last video, go ahead and skip ahead to the lighting setup section of this video. That way you can still get a really realistic looking result out of this video without having to purchase Substance Painter, because I do understand some people do not have access to it. So one of the things you need to do to prep for Substance Painter is to lay your UVs out properly. In order to do that, we're going to open up our UV editor, and then we're going to first turn this on so you can see it. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to lay out our UVs. So you've already done your UVs. Everything looks good. It's just a mess, right? We have a mess. Nothing's on the right area. This tutorial specifically is not going to go over UDIMs, so what we're going to do is we're going to lay our UVs out in one single UV plane. So what we're going to do, go to Modify, Layout. So just looking over your UV shells, make sure everything looks like it's supposed to. Make sure nothing got jacked up or skewed or anything like that. Smooth it to make sure you're not seeing any errors with the mesh itself, like colliding. And if you're good from here, then we are ready to start moving. So we're going to close our UV editor. Go ahead and save your scene again. And then I'd like to save my scene as a separate scene at this point. So I do fan to substance or whatever object to substance, just so I have one more backup. And having multiple backups has saved me multiple times with this whole tutorial series. When we're talking about moving from Maya to Substance Painter, you have to create what are called color map IDs. These color map IDs are actually very simple textures or materials, basically, that are going to tell Substance how to group your objects and how to properly lay them out and work with them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and then select everything that we need to adjust. So we know by looking at our concept art, which I will pull up here in just a second. We know that looking at our reference, most of this is copper. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put this over on the side here. In fact, I'll just turn this on so you can still see the reference. So we know that a lot of this is copper. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these items that are copper. So that's the fan grade, everything that we're working with here technically. I'm going to select all of this because it's all going to be that copper material. All right. This too, this guy, and these little clips in here. Okay. All right, so this is all of our copper material. So if you move that out of the way, you should be left over with a bunch of stuff that's not going to be copper. Okay, so with all of our objects selected, this is going to be our first color ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click, go to Assign New Material, and do a Lambert. This Lambert material is going to be our first identifier. So we're going to name this copper underscore components. And with that done, we can change the color on this. So we're probably, you don't have to match it to what you're doing, but sometimes I will. So that's our copper, right? That's the material we're going to use there. Next thing we have to start establishing is what else do we have? So we have screws. These screws are kind of a brushed metal, so we're going to select all these. And then if there's anything else in here that is the same material, like the fan blade, we will select that. And then we're going to go ahead and apply it. And we're going to go right click, assign new material. New material, we'll do another Lambert. It doesn't matter, you can use Fong, you can use whatever you want. It's really just to let Substance know what you're working with. We're going to do this brushed metal. And I'm going to assign this a blue material, just to kind of keep with the visibility theme here. So we have that material set up. So the next thing we got to look at is plastics. So these knobs, they're plastic. So is this inner casing. And the power switch, and then this guy. So these are plastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign another material. Same thing, new material, Lambert. Call this plastics. And we'll just make this like a nice green. Why not? Okay. So we're starting to work our way down the list. The last thing we have are our rubber components. So for these components, we're just going to select them, assign new material, same process. I find it's best to keep as few of these as possible. That way you don't have that much to work with. So we'll go color. Change this to, we'll go yellow. We'll do rubber. All right. So if we give our model a once over, should be good. Shouldn't have any issues there. You're gonna go ahead and save your scene. If Maya is still having the same problem that I think it's still having, just freeze and knock everything out. All right, so we're gonna select all of this. We're gonna go File, Export Selection. Go to wherever you saved this. You should be defaulted to your scene folder. I just reinstalled Maya, so I have to set a bunch of stuff back up. This will go in your scenes folder. We're gonna do the FBX. So fan underscore substance underscore export. We're gonna do and we're gonna do an FBX file. And export selection. Now, after we've done that, there is a problem here. When you export that and you import that into Substance Painter, it's going to import the low polygon model. The reason being is because we're just using smooth preview mode. So if you hit 1, you're just going to get this low polygon object. If that's what you need to do to work in Substance Painter, that is absolutely fine. But one thing you want to do is, because at this point, we're talking about a final asset. So we're going to take our model and we're going to smooth it. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to go to Mesh, Smooth. This is the part in the process where you're finally taking your model, you're going to import it into Substance, and you're going to work with it. You still can do the low polygon model. That's totally fine. You can also import the high polygon textures onto the low polygon model because they're going to be in the same UV island locations. However, this is the way going forward that I'm going to work with this. So with that said, select everything again, File, we'll go to export one more time, and we're gonna do the same export depending on what you're working with. I tend to work with the high polygon models in Substance just because I like to look at them and see what I'm dealing with. Okay, so we're gonna turn off our concept window. We're gonna power up Substance Painter. I do want to say that this is a very basic introduction to Substance Painter. I'm not gonna go through a whole lot of stuff with it. I'm going to go through enough to where you can get comfortable with getting your objects into Substance Painter and working with things. Close. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File, New. We're going to stick with PBR Metallic Roughness. This is usually the default that I work with on hard surface models. This changes if you're working with, characters or organic assets. Just depends. We're going to select our file. Go to our fan tutorial, and then our scenes. And we're going to open the substance export.fbx. Here's where you have to make some decisions. Depending on your computer and depending on what you can handle, you're going to want to work with either 1K, 2K, 3K, or 4K files. Substance is non-destructive, so you can always upgrade them depending on what you want your final result to be. I tend to just work with 4K because my computer can handle it. If your computer cannot handle it, make sure you're selecting something like 2K or 4K. 2K or 1K. I wouldn't recommend going lower than that unless you're working with like PlayStation 2 looking assets because the results are just not going to be great. But I'm going to use 4K. You do not have to. You can use something lower. If you're seeing issues, that's when you want to start dropping that number. We're going to hit OK. It's going to import our model. And here we are. We are in Substance Painter. The movement is very similar to Maya. Kind of the same keys to control, move around, and everything like that. Within Substance Painter, before you can just start slapping materials on your objects, you need to actually bake the object. Baking is where you generate a lot of the details that would normally come down from like lighting and things like that, and you bake them into a texture map. It also allows Substance to use what are called smart materials to adapt the material to the mesh in a way that actually makes sense instead of just kind of throwing things everywhere. So baking is the first step of this process. So you're going to go over this little croissant looking icon. We're going to hit that. And we're going to look at our baking options. So you can see our 3 layers or our 4 layers that we created. These are all imported in from Maya. You'll notice the colors don't show up in Substance. That's just because they are just ID layers. They don't actually show up in Substance Painter as something that you can work with. Those materials don't really matter. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to change our resolution to whatever resolution you set your file to. You don't have to. I do this. This is my own workflow. So I'm going to hit 4K. And then just look down here to make sure there's anything we don't really need. These are all generally fine. I generally leave these at default. Some of these other settings you may need to use to adjust to make sure you're not getting any weird issues, but we'll go over issues if we find them. And then we're gonna hit bake textures. This does take a minute, so be prepared just to sit there and watch all the colors change and watch everything happen. So go ahead and hit bake. And depending on what resolution you're working at, this process will be faster. All right, so now that our bake is done, we've gotten all that information baked into our model. Go ahead and hit return to painting mode. And you'll notice your model looks a lot nicer now. Things have like shadows and ambient occlusions actually playing into the scene now. This way you can kind of identify like, hey, my bake worked. I like to just spin around to make sure there's no errors. Sometimes you'll get weird black shadow errors. Those generally tend to be issues with your UV layout. So if you run into those, that may be something you need to go back and check. But we're looking good. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to look at applying materials to this thing. So I'm going to hit the little filter box up here. We're going to go down to Smart Materials. Smart Materials are an awesome place to start, especially when you're talking about doing a hard surface object. When you're talking about creating realism, things like that, these are a really good starting point that you can make a lot of adjustments on. So copper, we know we're dealing with copper. Are we dealing with like a dented copper or like a really nice polished, worn copper? We're gonna try both of these materials and just see how they look. So when you drag it, you'll notice that it selects your different groups. So we're gonna apply this to the copper group, because that's where it needs to be. So this is a nice worn copper, and honestly, that's pretty close to what we want. It looks really nice. It's got some nice detail to it. The only thing I'm seeing is it's a little too reflective, but we're gonna work on that. So the next thing we wanna look at is our screws. The screws I've grouped with the blade. The blade is for sure aluminum. So we're gonna take our aluminum material, assign it to that. We have that nice brushed aluminum look on there. So cool, so we're getting there. All right, the next thing we gotta look at is our plastics. There's a couple of different options for plastic in Substance Painter. The one I like to generally use is the plastic gloss scuff, because that gives you a little bit more detail and you can work with adjusting the scuffs if you need to. So we're gonna go ahead and apply those to the knobs here. And if you're working in 4K, remember these can take a little bit. All right, so we've got our nice plastic scuffs. And you can see they're working really well on our UV. So we did right, we did good. Okay, so there we go. We have our copper, we have our plastic scuffs, everything like that. Now we need to do a rubber. There's a couple of different options for rubber. Plastic rubber is a good one for like cords and cables and things, so we're gonna try that one. And that's honestly probably good enough for what we're trying to do. So if we look at our UV, everything's pretty clean. Everything's working pretty well. All right, what am I thinking so far? So we're gonna go back to our copper. And one of the cool things about Substance Painter is when you are working inside of it, you can isolate things really easily. So all of those groups we created in Maya, you can actually just turn them off. So right now we're looking at our copper group. What am I noticing so far? I'm noticing that right now the copper is a little orange. So if I pull up once again my window here, you can see this copper is kind of a rose gold almost. So we need to kind of drop this goldness, or this kind of orange color. So we're gonna look at our base material, our base metal. We're gonna go scroll this guy up here. Yours may not be. Sometimes Substance opens kind of weird. And we're gonna scroll all the way down to the base color here. It's the cool thing about Substance Painter. You can click on your color selection tool and you get the same little layout that you're used to. There's a color picker. This color picker can be used on everything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on it, drag it over to my monitor on the on where my concept art is. And I'm gonna select the copper tone that we're dealing with. I'm gonna find the best area of the image that represents the color that I'm going for. So we'll click this, go over here, and select it. There we go. Now you have a more accurate representation of what you're working with. To me though, it's still looking a little rough. So we've got the right color, but I think I just need to wash it out a little bit more. Let me see. Maybe I just need to brighten it up a bit. We'll go right about there. I'm thinking that's about right. Okay. So pretty good. Other issue is we have a lot of dirt. Our dirt map on this object is kind of distracting. It's causing issues, so we don't really want to use that. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at it with the dirt disabled. So dirt disabled versus not disabled, actually kind of playing towards the color, so I might just take off the worn material. There we go. So the worn material is where we're getting a lot of like weirdness. So what I want to do is I want to just play with the roughness here. And you can see how this adjusts how dark and how light the roughness is, as well as options like metallic. And looking at this, we're getting pretty good there, but I think that's a little too shiny. I think that's okay. All right, so looking at it, doing okay. So one of the things that we have here, if you look at our model, and this is something, if you did the Maya portion of this, you didn't really get to do, because there is detail there that's not present. So if we look at our concept art, I'll turn it on again. And if I zoom in right here, you can see there's this ring of like black. So that's something we want to make sure we generate. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an actual fill layer, and we're going to paint it in. So I'm going to go my copper. I'm going to create a fill layer. You'll notice this is going to change everything. So what we're going to do, we're going to change the fill layer to probably about, like that. And then we're going to add a mask. We're going to add a black mask. So at this point now we have this material, but if I come here, if I go to paint, if I go to paint and I paint, you can see that it's pulling that material through. So what I want to do is I'm going to change to brushes over here. So these are all of our brush selections. If you use Photoshop, you're kind of used to stuff like this. We're going to just kind of look for the best option here. And these are kind of like streaks going up the material. So we're looking at kind of a dirt splash. I kind of like the look of this one. All right, so looking at this, what we notice is that we can draw, we can paint, but the problem is it's not, it's kind of doing a lot of stuff that I don't want it to do. It's actually stretching really badly. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of rotate this. All right, so what I'll do is I'll change this to full preview just so I can kind of see what I have. The other thing is down here, you'll notice you have your controls for your brush. We're actually going to rotate the brush probably to about 180. That way we have that nice look to it. So if I click here and then hold and shift, to do it like this, hold and shift, you can see it does that nice streak across. The only problem is that we're getting a little bit too much like pattern. So what I want to do, and then honestly, I don't know if I'm liking this brush. So let's see here. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the way that brush is looking. So here's my thought. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a basic soft brush, change the size. Let's, get that right about there. And I'm just gonna go around the bottom here. Need to go a little bit smaller than that though. This is going to give us that nice like black line that we're dealing with. And there are ways to automate this and do this in Substance Painter, but those are going to be for a more advanced tutorial later on. Kind of trying to show you guys how to paint a little bit in Substance Painter. That way you get used to the material workflow, the smart material workflow, as well as like the hand painting workflow, because I think both are very important. And all I'm doing again is hitting shift, or holding shift and then clicking. So look away, that's giving us that nice dark detail. And I'm just kind of following the geometry here because it does kind of angle a little bit with the smooth that we did. Okay. Gonna go completely around the base. Alright, so we got that nice dark ring that's giving us that nice shadow detail where the copper was pressed in. Now we need to look at how we want to get those stripes going up the copper. So if I look at my brushes here, that one's a little too rough. But actually, you know what? Hold on. Let's try this one. So the brush we're looking at right now is called Kyle's, what is this one? Kyle's Concept Brushes. So that actually gives us a really nice look. The problem is that I don't want to put that on top of the black mask because I want to be able to adjust this mask. So what we're going to do, I'm going to create another fill layer. We're going to do the same thing, black, and then we're going to add a black mask. All right, so now we've got this. So this first layer is our depth detail layer. Second layer is going to be metal streaking. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this I'm going to add this texture all the way down. And all we're doing here is adding a supplemental like color to this. And you may think, oh, that looks like crap. Don't worry, we're going to make some adjustments with some curves. Yeah, I don't like the way that one looked. Because in the end, we want this to be a very subtle detail, but you can tell that it was like extruded. And it's going to play to that line that we just painted. All right, so there we go. We have our streaks. So what are we going to do? The next thing we're going to do, we're going to right click. We're going to, actually, we don't have to right click. You can just go up here to the magic wand and add a level. So this levels tool is going to allow us to adjust a histogram curve, depending on what we set that curve to. So if we look at this, and I accidentally applied it to the mask, so make sure you don't do that. So select the base color and then apply the tool. You can see that actually gives you the curvature graph for that. So from here we can make adjustments. We can change that, we can do whatever we need to. So my main goal here is to just kind of clamp it a bit and then change the look of it. So let's see. We're going to actually change this to opacity. And we're going to just play with these a minute. Let's see here. So you can see kind of how some of these are working out. But I'm not a huge fan on how that's working. So let's do this. We're going to remove the levels. We're going to look at our actual paint material itself, and we're going to kind of adjust things here. So we can add some height to this. We don't really want to though, because that's just gonna kind of muck things up. So let's see. Can change our roughness up a little bit. And here we can drop our opacity a bit. And then when we're talking about doing this, go to our mask. We can change our grayscale to black. We can kind of go through and just texturally remove a little bit of this, because we don't really want this going all the way up like this. So we'll paint these out. Just so we're retaining that detail, but we're not, doesn't look like we just painted the entire side of the model. This comes down to personal preference on how you want to make these look, but these streaks are there because this was pressed. Like, this material was actually pressed in the machine, and then it was spit out and then assembled somewhere else. So we want to try to add that detail as much as possible. Because really this is, you're talking about like a copper stretch, so like the way you stretch copper, you'll notice that it starts to create these like tearing looking material. And this is what we're trying to replicate here. So we're just going to continue kind of painting that out a bit. Gives us a nice uneven look because we don't want perfection here. We're not looking for perfection. All right. So there we go. When you're looking far away from it, you don't really like notice it. It's one of those things too where you need to kind of look at it and say like, am I just looking too closely at this? The other issue is like, look at how shiny that is. That shouldn't be that shiny. So we need to adjust the metallic and the roughness, because that's too much. So let's see. I think we're getting a lot of the metallic from the, yeah, we were getting a lot of the metallic from that. So the other thing we can do is we can adjust our base color a bit. Go for like a lighter material. Still giving us quite the bit of shine though, so we don't want to do that. Okay. Alright, so if we pull away, it's looking pretty good. It's not perfect, but it gets us to a good starting point. Other thing we got, so we have these two pieces of metal that meet up. So we're gonna look at our depth detail again. We're gonna go back to our basic soft brush. I'm just gonna add a slight, let's go a little bit bigger than that. No, we're in the wrong grayscale, sorry. So we just want to do like a slight coloring here. So we'll click there, drag across to about here. Oh, and that's where our seam is. Okay. So we got that nice base color there. The metal streaking, we will add, once again, a little bit more detail. Actually, really what I want to do, I want to kind of like reduce this detail a bit. So, redo. So what we'll do is we'll just paint our mask differently. So we go our depth detail. We're just going to kind of tear that up a bit. So it's still there, but you're getting more of a textured feel to it. Yeah. That way it gives you that nice kind of depth where you can tell like that's where the metal meets. Just clean that up a little bit there. And this all comes down to personal preference. However you want to texture this thing is how you want to texture this thing. These are just ways that I would normally go about this. So we have a little bit of darkness in these screw holes, and I do want to kind of replicate that, just because we don't want these to be super shiny. So with our depth detail, we're going to just go in here with this basic soft brush. Change your grayscale. And you can see that kind of adds like a nice dark punch. And do the same thing over here. The only issue is that is creating a weird kind of outline. Actually, I don't know. Let me see. That's actually kind of cool. I like that. Okay. Kind of creates a detail where the screw is like punched in. All right. Do the same thing to the back. Okay. So we have those little dark holes now, and then when we turn on our brush metal again, it just kind of gives a nice feedback to it. So it's just one of those little details you can do. All right, so looking at this now, we got to look and see what else we got to do. So first off, we're gonna hide our copper components for right now. We're gonna look at our brush metal components. Right now, if you compare this to the concept or the original image, it's very streaky. So we want to look at our brush metal. All right, so we got too much streaking going on, and we can turn these off to just kind of establish where that's coming from. And I'm pretty sure it's coming from this brush linear. So do we want to keep the brush linear? Right now, this material is just looking a little too dirty. But we also don't want to take away from it. So we'll look at this. I think what I'm going to end up doing is looking at our scratches and trying to just blend these out a little bit by adjusting the balance. Like, I do still want that shiny metal, but I think we just have way too much going on. We can change the contrast on these as well, make them darker or lighter. And we've got a pattern that we can work with as well, but I think I'm gonna change that. Let's see. What else we got here? So we can do some tiling. And it actually may be better to have it tiled like heavier. I actually kind of like the look of that because it's a little bit more uniform. And then we'll just change the balance on this a bit. And let's turn our copper components back on to see how that looks. See, that gives a much smoother look while still keeping that detail in that blade. So I think we're going to stick with that, because that's giving me the look that I wanted. All right, so I think we're pretty good there. The screws I'm not super worried about. They don't really show much detail. They're pretty small. Okay. So that's pretty good there. All right, so we've got that. Let's look at our plastics. Honestly, probably not going to do anything with these. Maybe adjust the scratches a little bit. Just kind of balance it out a bit. It's okay to have a little bit of scratching on there. I'm not necessarily super concerned with it, but otherwise that kind of gets the point across. The only thing I'm noticing is it might be a little bit too glossy. So let's do this. We're gonna get out of that. I'm gonna go to our, see where we're getting glossy here. We're getting glossy down here on this plastic. So metallic means it's turned down low. So let's turn that up a bit. and then roughness. We want a little bit of gloss, but not a lot of gloss, because it's not exactly a reflective surface. So that's probably pretty good. I'm good with that. All right, so we have an issue. When we modeled this, the motor itself only has one part. It only has one material. So how can we fix that? So what we're gonna do, again, we're gonna just let's turn off the brushed metal and we'll turn off the copper components. So we have this motor. Ideally, we want this part to be silver. So what we can do, we can add another material to this. So we have our plastic gloss. So we're gonna go up to our smart materials again. And we're gonna guess that this would be, let's see, is there a brushed? Here's steel. This would be like a steel rod. So we're gonna add that smart material. That adds another smart material, but it deletes our plastic material. Or at least it looks like it deletes our plastic material. The reality is we just need to add a black mask. So once again, that's cleared. And then we can do a couple of things here. So we can paint this material on there. So you're essentially painting with the smart material, which is what I'm gonna do. We're just gonna bring this out. That way we've got this painted and it looks nice. The reality is this is so hidden, you're probably never gonna notice it, but it's an important thing to know. The other issue is these internal pieces. These internal pieces would technically be steel. So we're gonna do the same thing. Just gonna paint them. It's gonna add that little extra, oh, where did my model go? I lost myself. Okay, there I am. Okay. We're gonna just paint this stuff in here. Make sure we have a good coverage. And you can also paint by shell, depending on how you laid out your shells. That's for another tutorial later. For now, I just want you to get comfortable using the interface itself. All right, cool. We have our little metal components now on our plastic components. It's a really easy way to add those details, which is awesome. All right, so we have these. Remember though, we have our switch, right? The switch has has texture to it. So we look at it. We have a circle, a line, and a 2 line. So the question is how do we want to get that? Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to add another layer. We'll add another fill layer. We're going to do a black mask as well. And white is actually good for this. So we will keep white. We're going to click on our black mask. We're going to drop this guy down pretty low. And we're going to go boom. 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 Right about here. Okay, so we have our 2 switches there. And then we can also go down to our smart masks. Sorry. We can also go down to our alphas and type in circle. It may take a minute to load all these. And we've got this nice little circle. So we can increase the size here. And just get it right about here. Boom. All right. And I'm honestly not super happy with that, so let's just get rid of those guys. We're going to start off with the circle. We're going to put it right in the center there. So we have our little power button. Right about here, I think. Is that right? That's about right. A little bit higher. All right. So there's that. And then we will go over here. You can just turn your mask off. brush. Just kill the mask there. And we'll go back to our actual brushes. And go back to our basic soft. The thing is I want to match the thickness of this, so we actually might do a basic hard, especially because it wouldn't necessarily be a soft material. I'm thinking like 0.8. 0.8 is probably pretty good. Go boom. Boom. A little bit further in. These need to be thinner. So we'll drop this down to about 0.4 maybe. 0.4 should work. Okay, just make sure that's kind of even there. You can be as super like picky about this as you want to. I'm not going to be, because it's such a small detail. Okay. So, got our little detail back there. I'm still not super happy about that circle. I am happy with my lines though, so what I can do is I can just go... Oop, not that. I can just erase the circle, and I can re-add it. So if I go back into my masks, or my alpha, sorry, circle, we will just make sure you're on brush mode. Do circle again. Change the size. Too big. Right about there. Cool. That looks about right. It's not perfect, but it does help. Okay. Next thing. Turn off our alpha again. So these are just 2D like paint splotches. We kind of want to add some depth to that. So we're going to go back to our color. And we're going to go down here. And look at our height. So we're going to add a little bit of height to it. That way we've got that nice kind of like, this was a little applique, I think is the word you'd use, but it was applied to the button, got some texture to it. That way you've got that nice depth detail. So we're going to leave it there. That's pretty solid. Then that kind of takes care of our plastic components. So now if we turn everything back on, you can see we've got this nice detail kind of coming through, but we don't have the logo. We don't have the Holmes logo. I'm not going to put the Holmes logo on here because the reality is I don't own that, and probably shouldn't have even used it in this concept art, but I digress. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new alpha. Let's see, we're going to add a resource, and then I'm going to add my own logo. You can add whatever you would like. If you would like to use my logo, I have added it to the Google Drive. So we're going to add my alpha, open, undefined, alpha, import. Okay, that's going to work properly. So now you can see we got our alpha. All right. So I'm going to scale this guy down a bit. We're going to put it right about here. Boom. Boom, boom. Okay. Looks awesome. Except for the fact that it's just kind of, it's not really, hold on. I'm not working with opacity, so I don't know why it's there. So I'm just going to center this as best as possible. Boom, 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 boom. Click it a couple of times. Just get that nice dark logo. Okay. It's there. Same thing here. We're going to adjust the height a little bit. Make it look like it's actually a sticker or something. Yeah, that's probably pretty good. All right, so we got my logo on the fan. You can do the same thing with any logo you'd like to. It doesn't really matter. I chose to use mine because it's my branding and I own it. Okay. Rubber. Not much is going to change with this. The only thing really that's going to change is our plugs. Because reality is we need to actually adjust that. So we're going to go down to our rubber material, close that folder up, same thing, add a fill layer. Actually, you know what? Don't do that. Instead, what we'll do is we will apply another smart material just to make this easy on ourselves. We'll do steel because this is going to be a steel material. Okay, it's done calculating. And then I'm going to add a black mask. And then we need to get rid of our alpha, first of all. And then we will change our brush back to something that actually makes sense, which is a basic hard brush. The reason we're using a hard is because we kind of have a hard edge here. Remember, this UV was pretty much garbage in this area, so if it doesn't look fantastic, don't worry about it. The reason it doesn't look fantastic is because we didn't spend a lot of time on it, unless you did. If you did, good for you. I did not, because I just did not actually care about this small of a piece. Okay. And again, there are ways you can poly paint this. You can do a couple of different ways, but right now I'm working with standard brushes because I'd like you to learn the workflow with the standard brushes, because I know it took me a while to figure out how to change brushes and how to kind of navigate the interface of Substance Painter. Okay. So we're good there. We dipped a little bit over here. We can just fix that by reversing our grayscale and just kind of cleaning that up real quick. Everything else is good. That looks super solid. I think the only thing is that I'm not liking the way the rubber is looking on this plug. And the only way I can think of really kind of fixing that is to add a plastic material to it instead. But I don't really want to do that. So I think I'm going to leave it. So that's it for painting and texturing and Substance. There's a lot more you can do with Substance. I want you to keep in mind, this is just the bare minimum. What we're going to do now is we're going to work on getting this out of Substance and back into Maya, which can be a little bit of a pain. So we're going to go save scene. And I was really bad and I did not actually save this as a scene. So make sure you do that. I'll just generally put it in my scenes folder, and then I'll just add a new folder called Substance. And I'll plop it in there. So we have that saved. So what do we do now? So now we're going to go to File and Export Textures. So you can see we have all of our things selected. Everything's good. I'll change this generally to 16 bits. You don't have to, but you can. And we want to change this folder. So this folder is going to go and point our projects. We're going to go into our fan tutorial. Fan. We're going to go to our source images. And then we're going to go create a new folder. Just for the sake of organization. So let's see. Fan _ textures. Okay. Hit this, select folder. All right, so we've got that. We're doing PBR metallic roughness, PNG, 16 bits. We're all good there. We're going to save the settings. And we're going to go to export textures. You can see those all saved, and then export. This is going to run through, export all of our materials, and we're going to start pulling them into Maya in our rendering scene that we set up in the last video. So if you haven't done that yet, go back to the last video and set up your rendering scene. Okay, so once you have blue across the board, we're good. Save it one more time. Okay, now back into Maya. So here's Maya. We're here. So there's a couple of different things that I'll do here. Importing materials from Substance Painter into Maya can actually be a huge pain, but one of the ways I found to make it a little bit faster for myself is to do it this way. So I'm going to go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. I'm going to open up the Hypershade, and I'll turn it on for you right now. There we go. Okay, so here's our Hypershade. So we have our copper material, right? This is our baseline that we set up. So from here, I'm going to right-click on that copper material and select objects with the material. It's going to automatically select everything that we had assigned to that. We're going to go and assign a new material, go to Shader, and do an AI Standard Surface Shader. Change the name. Fan _ final underscore material, fan underscore copper underscore final material. Okay. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to delete this material because I don't want it anymore. When you're talking about trying to keep it organized, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you so you can see what I'm doing, because that's a little small. You want to stay as organized as possible. So deleting these old materials and then creating the new ones is going to be really helpful to you in the long run. All right, so we got our plastics now. So we're going to do the same thing, select objects, see what selects it, assign new material, same thing, shader, standard surface. I'm going to do fan underscore plastics underscore final underscore material. You actually don't have to add the underscores. It'll do it for you, but I'm just so used to doing it at this point. And then we're going to delete that one. Same thing with the brushed metal. And you're going to just go through and do the same exact thing on the rubber too. So we're going to do assign new material, shader, AI standard surface, fan underscore brushed underscore metal underscore final underscore material. Okay, and then delete that guy, and then the rubber. Select objects, assign existing, or assign new material, my bad. New material, shader, and fan underscore rubber underscore final underscore material. All right, cool, and delete that. Sweet. So I messed up. I did this in the wrong scene. You can open up your rendering scene and do the same thing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to select this. I'm going to actually delete these layers because they're not necessary anymore. Delete layer. We're going to create a new layer. Fan underscore final. Save. I'm going to just disable that. And I'm going to go to File, Import. Oh, File, Import. Go back to my folder here. In fact, let me fix this. So if you open a new project, just go to your Set Project button, and then we'll set the project here. Fan tutorial, fan set. Okay, so now if I go to Import, it's going to give me all of my scenes. Okay, so we're going to do rendering. I'm going to import the rendering. Okay, beautiful, fantastic. Kept everything, we're all good. I don't need to worry about this. What is that little box? What is that? Place 3D texture. I don't know why that's in there. Okay, we're gonna select everything but, or we're just gonna select the whole fan. We're gonna delete the fan. Bye, no more. Okay. All of this junk is gonna get deleted because we don't need it. We just want to keep our lights. Fan rendering, delete. And then these planes are good, so we'll keep those. All right, so we have our fan. Delete layers. Delete layers. Just to kind of organize here. And then fan final. Okay, cool. I'm gonna file, save scene as fan underscore final underscore rendering. This is going to be our final kind of project that we're going to be working in. All right, so we have our fan set up. Everything's good. We have our new materials set up. The only thing you may notice is it imported a bunch of crap materials that we don't need. So we're going to just delete these. Okay, so we have our materials. We're going to go to material attributes. You can see fan copper material. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start assigning all of our individual textures now. So color, we're going to go file, change that file. And then we're going to go to our fan textures folder. And this, you'll notice the way it exports things. So we're going to go look for our copper components. We're going to hit our base color. It's that nice rose gold copper. And apply it. This is where things are going to get a little weird while you're working on it because your materials are going to disappear as you're adding them. So don't stress too much. Metal. We're going to add our metallic shader now, or our metallic texture file. This is where we're going to start changing a couple of things. So we need copper metallic. in order for Maya to read these properly, you need to change this to raw color space. And we need to go down to our color balance and check alpha is luminance. Once that's set, Maya knows how to read that material. All right, so we're down to specular now. We have a roughness map. We need to add that. So go to File. Same thing. We're going to go to our textures. Oops. And we got our roughness map. Hit Open. Same thing here. We're going to go Utility, Raw, and then change that to alpha is luminance. And then the only other one we need to add now is our bump map. So we're going to go bump map, File, image name, and where's our normal? Okay, we don't really have much of a normal here. There's a little bit of detail in there somewhere, but not super worried about it. We're going to change the color space back to raw, and then this is the one where you uncheck alpha as luminance. That is going to give you a material in Maya that works the same way that your other one did. If you look at the little preview ball we have, we've got this nice copper material. That's exactly what we're going for. All right, so the next thing is we got to do our metals. So we'll do material attributes. The reason these are applying the way they are because when we export it from Substance Painter, it creates the individual textures per the color ID channels that we created earlier in this process. So it's really easy to apply them. It's just a little tedious. We'll do the same thing here. We're going to go File, Fan Textures, and we're going to look for the brushed metal. We want the color, base color. And it's just kind of a gray. We don't get too much out of that. Metalness, we'll add File, same thing. Fan Textures, Metallic, Open. This is where you need to change back to raw and change the alpha's luminance. Okay. And then roughness, specular roughness. We're going to add that. That's where we get a lot of our detail in this map. So we're going to go Fan Textures down here into the roughness. And see, that's where most of our detail is coming from. Okay. Same thing. Utility raw, alpha's luminance. And then I don't, again, think that there's a normal, but there might be. So let's just add it just in case. It's looking like that's pretty empty, so we'll add it. Might as well, raw. And then uncheck alpha's luminance. Okay, cool. Let's do our plastics. Do the same thing here. Looking for plastics, base color. Nope, that's rubber, base color. Open. And you have to do this for every material. Some people have created scripts to do this. I don't currently have one. Not super necessary, I don't think, but if you want to, it's something you can do. Metallic, open. You're just going to go through and do the same thing on all of these. This one I do believe actually has a bump map, though, because of the scratches. So we'll make sure we add that. Normal. Open. Oop, wait. Wait a minute. Nope. Did the wrong material. I was thinking normal, but I needed roughness. Roughness. There we go. Okay, change that to utility raw. And invert. Nope. Alpha's luminance. Okay. Sometimes you get a little turned around. All right. Same thing. Add the normal map. This is the first one that actually kind of has a normal map, so don't be super surprised. Yeah, there's a little bit going on there. Change that to raw and turn off alpha's luminance. So that material's done. All right, last one we got to do is our rubber. So we'll go material attributes, run through that whole process. File. Base color. Open. Metalness. File. Metallic. The nice thing is these texture files do basically everything for you as long as you set them up properly. And then the roughness for the specular. Go boom. Oh, hi. Hello. Go away. Roughness, open. Same thing. Utility raw. Alpha's luminance. Bump mapping, we're going to add. Even if it's not necessary, just because we've got something to work with. Oh, there is something there, so, all right. We'll open that. Change it to raw. And alpha's luminance is unchecked. Okay, so materials are set. The only question I have now is if I look at these, and we're going to browse to this drive real quick. I want to look at my height map. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything on the copper with the height map. Personal art, projects, fan tutorial. Okay, so if we look at our source images, we go to our fan textures. If I go to copper, and I look at the height map, I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything here. Okay, I'm not. So the good thing is I'm not, because it transmitted all of that information to the bump map. Sometimes with height maps, you will get a lot of detail, especially if you're doing like scales on a lizard or something like that. You'll get a lot of detail that you want to import in, and that's a whole separate process. That'll be something I go over in a later, more advanced tutorial for Substance Painter. Now, if I can actually select this stupid thing, there we go. Okay, so save your scene. Now that your files are all imported, make that smaller. So the question is, now what? Well, now you've got your rendering set up. You got everything going, so we can go in here, just kind of frame up real quick. I don't believe we created a camera for this scene, so let's do that. We're going to go to rendering, create a camera. So here's our camera, and there's the point of focus. We're going to pull our camera up, out, and now what I like to do is I will actually hit panels and then look through selected, and I will adjust this myself because I want to get what angle I want without having to finick too much with it. So there we go. Change back to perspective. That way you're not moving around. And it actually looks like we did create a camera. I just don't know where it is. Sweet. Okay. So we have our camera. We're going to go ahead and close out our hypershade. We're going to open up our rendering window. We're going to look at our rendering settings. These are going to be wholly dependent on what kind of machine you're working with. I'm using Arnold, and I'm going to be using Arnold GPU-based rendering. If you don't have a GPU that can handle this or is capable of this, I recommend you use CPU rendering. The settings are basically the same, aside from the fact that you have to manually adjust your diffuse specular transmission, all of those. With GPU, it just kind of handles it for you. So I'm going to set this to about 4. We're going to go to common settings, and we're going to work at 1080p. If your machine can't do 1080p quickly, do 720p. Do something that works for your computer. All right, and then from here, in our render view settings, make sure in your render settings you change it to camera 1. And we're going to render the current frame. And it's going to do something weird. Okay. We'll pop it up here. Maya, if you're using GPU rendering, is going to go through and convert and create .tx files for all of your materials. So it may take a second to actually get a result out of this. Okay, there we go. So we'll notice that it's giving me a different render than what I wanted. So I'm going to actually cancel that with escape key. I'm going to change this to camera shape 1, and then I'm going to redo that. Why is my redo option not working? Stop. Redo. Okay. So not currently framed well. So I'm going to move the camera up just a tad bit. We'll go up a little bit more. I think I need to, yeah, that's what I need to do. Okay. Raise that down just a little bit. Okay, we're good with that. We'll go ahead and let this render. All right, so first thing I'm noticing is our scene way too overlit. So we're going to save that snapshot. And if you want to, what you can do, you can use the snapshot folder. And then I'll just create this in my same projects folder, select folder. Yes. And that's going to save your snapshot, so you can go back through and look at all the changes you made. And every time you open the scene, it's going to reopen all your old renderings, which is really nice. It's a little bit slow, but saves things. Okay. So we've got that set. We have too much light. So I'm going to take this guy, and I'm going to pull it back. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be pointing in that direction. But right now, why is that looking like a... Oh, it imported it as a camera. How weird. Let's not do that. Okay, so this directional light. So we've got this guy. So I was thinking I kind of want my directional light coming in from the side. I'm going to scale this so I can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to move this over here, kind of rotate it a bit. I'm going to go to Arnold. I'm going to change this to about 1. And then from here, we're going to create a area light. We're going to create a basic 3 light setup. Just going to aim that way. Okay. I'm going to go to our Arnold tab. I'm going to set this guy to about 17. And then we're going to duplicate this, move it over here. So my main light source is coming from that direction, so that's technically my key light. So I'm going to make this guy about 15. And then we're going to do a little bit of a rim light. So we're going to pull this back here. And just kind of pull this up a little bit. And this guy is going to be our lowest light, so we'll put it at about 12. All right, so with those changes made, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save the scene, just because it's been a second. I like to save a lot when I'm rendering, just because crashes are terrible when you're rendering, because you have to remember all the things you adjusted. So comments, we're going to add a comment to this latest snapshot and say, let's see, this guy was base setup 1 directional light. You don't have to add the notes, but I find they help me. So when you click on that now, you can see what happened there. All right, so we're going to do a new render, see what has changed. You can already see that we get a really nice like depth there, but the problem is like the copper to me is looking a little too shiny. So we need to play with that material a little bit and drop that shimmer down a bit. So we're going to save that snapshot. I'm going to do new 3-point lighting setup. Okay, so let's look at our copper material. Okay, so with our copper material selected, we're going to go to material attributes. So we're going to be adjusting the metallic because the metallic is going a little crazy here. We're going to go to color balance, and I'm actually just going to change the exposure and drop it a bit. And we already saved that snapshot, so we're going to do another render. So I dropped it too much. Just going to kind of keep playing with it. There we go. That's actually really nice. I like that look right there. Snapshot that. I'm going to say dropped exposure on copper metallic. Okay, cool. Beautiful. So that gives us a much nicer result. So the other thing I'm not liking, this light is causing a little bit of a weird reflection that I don't want it to. So I'm actually going to move this a bit and see what this change. Okay, that's much better. Okay. So what you can see, and I'll show you here once this is done. So we're going to save that snapshot. The other cool thing about snapshots is it really allows you to go through and like look at what you've changed. So, oh shoot, I put that on the wrong one. Control C, Control B. Okay. All right, so this one moved secondary light. Okay, so you can see what changed, right? We had this large streak that was kind of going across the side here. So right about here. Large streak that was going through. So all we did was we adjusted that, and all I did was drop my exposure down to, on that material, down to, let's see, material attributes. I dropped my exposure on that guy just because I just realized you guys can't see this. If I go to my metallic, drop my exposure down to negative 0.513. All right, I'm going to adjust this render view here, and I'm going to move it over here because we're not doing anything over here right now. Most of the stuff we're doing is over here. So I'm sorry about that. I will fix that in the future. Okay, so we have a pretty good layout right now. We're getting a lot of speckling. Don't worry about the speckling. We'll fix that later. Where you at? Okay. Okay. So I like what we're getting so far. The thing that I'm not liking is I think I'm still getting too much environmental light. So I want to adjust this again. We're going to drop this down to 0.5. We're going to turn off the render view and render again. So that dropped it a little bit, gave us a little bit nicer of a shadow. Save that as a snapshot. And this one is just dropped directional light exposure to 0.5. Okay. This is a really good way of tracking and keeping up with what you're doing. So the other thing is I'm not getting a lot of light off of this rim light, so I want to try to play with this a little bit. So I'm going to bump it up to 15. Yeah, I'm actually really happy with that. Okay. So by upping that rim light to 15, you can see some of the changes we made. Let's see, we'll snapshot. Changed rim light to 15. Okay, so you can see the differences here, right? So the whole scene was very dark before. When you change the rim light, it kind of brightens it up, but it creates this nice cascading effect in the back that's like shadow. The other thing it did is look at the shadow on the fan. The shadow on the fan was much darker. Now it's lighter. It feels more like it's actually like in the scene. And it kind of just honestly helped all around. You get these nice little highlights on the knob and on the back of the fan, as if there's like some sort of overhead light going on. And just generally getting a nice look on that fan. And it's funny to me, the only thing that's actually standing out to me really at this point is like my logo. It just does not feel like it belongs there, but it's okay. You know, this is totally mine. So yours will have whatever you put on there. But we're starting to get a lot of really nice detail in here. So we've changed that. The other thing is I tend to add a little bit of color to my scene. So I'm going to take this light because we're not going to be in a normal scenario. You wouldn't be lighting with like direct white. So we're going to add some color to this guy. So we're going to kind of turn this into a tannish light and see what this does for us. So you can see that didn't change a whole lot, but what it did do was it kind of took this little streak right here and it made it kind of a tannish color. So it kind of added a better look to it. So I'm going to add, let's see, secondary light changed to tan. Okay. And then we're going to change the primary. The primary light here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add a little bit more of a darker hue to it though. Let's see what result that gets us. Let's see. That's actually looking pretty nice. So you can see now without using a bright white light, you're no longer going to get those like really nasty, gnarly, like bright white blooms. But instead we're getting this nice, clean color on the fan. So we're going to do this, save that snapshot. Changed key light color. And honestly, I'm really liking where we are right now. This is super cool. Okay. So when we talk about finalizing a render, we're in a position where we need to actually finish this thing, get it rolling, and, you know, make a final image out of it. Right now, if you render this out, it's going to look like a rendering. It's just not going to look great. It's not going to be realistically grounded because there's a couple things we're missing. Like, we've got some good lighting going on. We don't have some good camera work. So I want to change the camera a little bit. And this is going to require a little bit of technical work. So go ahead and save your scene. We're going to look at this. So we're going to take our camera. We're going to go down to Arnold. We are going to enable depth of field. This is the first of a couple steps. The next thing we have to do is we need to look through our camera again. So if we go camera 1. So we're looking through our camera. You may not have this open. I have this on by default, but this little thing up here, this little text thing up here, just go to Windows. I'm sorry, go to Display, go to Heads Up Display. You need to turn on Object Details. And if you didn't see where that was, just, oop. So you go to Windows, sorry, Display, Heads Up Display, Object Details. And then that's what you want. Okay. All right. So when I click on the center of this fan, which is what I want to focus on, you can see that this is 62, whatever your distance is set up in Maya. Usually, I think by default it's like millimeters or something like that. So we're at 62. All right, so I'm going to back out of my camera and go back to perspective mode. I'm going to go to my camera. I'm going to set the focus distance to 62.01, I think is close to what we had. Aperture size. We're going to do 1.2 to start. This is, if you know anything about cameras, the aperture size is how wide your aperture opens on the camera or how much light's being let in. Curvature blades, I usually just set it to about 12. I've never really had to adjust that too much. And we should be okay there. So that should be good. The next thing is we're going to do a render. So go render out. And you can see now you're getting that nice blurry background. The only thing is I think I'm getting too much blurry background. So we're going to adjust this a little bit. This is going to be where we kind of toy with the apertures. So I'm going to save that snapshot. Go to turned on DOF, depth of field, and set focal distance to 62.010 and aperture to 1.2 with 12 blades. Okay. The blades kind of comes into play when you're talking about getting those like firefly effects in the background, and that'll determine how like hexagonal the fireflies themselves look. So we're not super worried about that. That's why I usually just do 12. So we're going to try 1.8. That should give us a little bit less of a blurry look. Oh, shoot. There we go. It actually did more. So let's see. I'm going to change our aperture to about 1. Sometimes I'll just go through and cycle through and just try until I figure out where I want to be. 0.6. 0.6 looks like it's going to be where I want it to be. Yeah, 0.6 looks pretty good. All right, so that's good. We're not getting a lot of blurring on the background at all, or we are getting a lot of blurring on the background, but the object itself isn't blurring too much. The cable is. I might drop it to 0.4. Let's try that. We'll do one more render. All right. Yeah, that gave me a much better result. So we're going to snapshot that. Aperture changed to 0.4. These are settings that over time you start to figure out and learn. I'm not here to teach you how to use a camera because I don't really necessarily know either. These are just settings I generally will play with until I need to. A lot of the times in a production experience, you will get these settings handed to you so you can set the camera up properly. For me, it's just kind of a tweaking thing. I'll just go through and tweak things. Okay, so we have this render. It's looking beautiful. We've got some really great color coming out of it. I'm going to go ahead and save the scene one more time. And then from here, the last change we're going to make is we're going to make this render look better because it looks like garbage. So, a couple of things need to be done here. We can go to settings. If you're using CPU rendering, you're going to have to tweak a lot of these settings manually, depending on what you need. These are your samples. These are the samples that are being fired from the camera, bounced around the scene, and returned to the camera. With scenes like this, I will normally bump up to about 6 when I'm doing my final renders. That gives me 144 samples directly. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that preview mode right there. I'm going to render one more time. And just so you can see what I changed, because I just saw it's in the way again. Right here, we're changing under Arnold render, you're changing your camera settings, your camera. So we're going to render that. That should clear up a lot of the noise. It also increases your render time. So keep in mind, the more samples you throw in there, the longer your render is going to take. But the cleaner it's going to look. So we give that the time that it needs to render. And it rendered out a result in about 19 seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to snapshot that. All right, so we're going to look at our fan, zoom into it. You can see how it's still grainy, but you can see it got better. So we increased. So there are some options here. You can increase the samples in your scene. What the hell? We can continue increasing the samples in our scene. We can also increase the samples from our lights. So what I want to do, I'm going to close this. We're going to look at our lights. So we're going to go under Arnold. You can see samples are set to 1. I'm going to set this to 2. I'm going to set each one of these lights to 3. Just to see if this kind of cleans up the scene a little bit more for me. Okay. Changed render samples to 6. All right, turn that off, render again. Okay, we're gonna see if this gives us any more cleaner result. And you can see once again, it increased our render time. And this is just kind of the unfortunate result of rendering is as you go through your scene and increase your samples, you are going to increase the render time. So we went from 19 seconds probably to about what I'm going to guess is about 45 seconds. Okay. So we go ahead and save that snapshot. Adjusted lights to 3 samples. Okay. If we zoom in, you can see, you know, we still got grain. Like there's still quite a bit of grain, and that didn't change a whole lot. It changed a little bit. It did help. This is one of the cases where you can go through and change samples all day and you can really adjust things and clean things up. But when in the end, we're talking about a little tiny itty bit of noise. So what I would like to do, what I like to do anyway, is I'll go in here, go into my Arnold settings. I'm going to shore that up a little. Okay. So right here, you're going to go down to your imagers. We're going to add an imager. We're going to add a denoiser optics, or any of the denoisers should technically work. I just use optics because it seems to work the best for me. Keep in mind, if you're not GPU rendering, this isn't an option for you. If you are GPU rendering and you don't have some of these options, you may not have a compatible GPU for them. So you will have to tweak your samples. But if you have these options and you're good to go, close that. We've saved our thing there. We're going to go and do a new render. You can see the image comes out incredibly blurry. It looks horrible. But as you render through, it refines, it gets better, it gets cleaner. So we're going to let it run through its thing. This also improves our render time just a tad bit. because what it's doing is it's using logical cores on your GPU to actually go through and refine the render instead of trying to post-process everything with samples. All right, so you can see it dropped our render time by a couple of seconds. Really nothing great. The only thing that we do deal with here is you get fucking okay. You do get a lot of distortion. So this is one of those things you can use sparingly. We need to save that. So let's see, turned on denoiser. So we'll compare. So you can see this cleans up a lot. It also kind of adds like a little bit of a weird smooth look to it. So not necessarily something that I would suggest relying on wholeheartedly. The one thing I'm not liking is the way this blade's kind of looking. So I may actually just nix that. In fact, I think I'm going to. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to bump my samples up to 8. We're going to turn off our view and we're going to render this out. This will take a little bit longer just because, again, I increased my samples. And I'm just going to go throughout my scene and increase everything. Sometimes a little bit of grain is actually good. Like, it does play and make your scene look realistic and like it was actually pumped out of a camera. Grain is not necessarily the enemy, but what you don't want are fireflies and heavy grain, because if you're rendering out a scene that is animated, you'll get a lot of like weird pixel shifting. That grain is just not going to look good. Okay, so we can see that took a total of 1 minute and 7 seconds to render. So we're going to save the snapshot. And we're going to look at this and just turned off optics and boosted samples to 8. Enter. Okay, so we have, you can see that we've brought the grain back, but it kind of kept a lot of the detail that I like. So between this and this, we're getting a much cleaner image. So what I want to do is I'm going to go adjust the samples on my lights one more time. We're going to boost to, I'm thinking 5. We'll go up by 2 samples on each one. And we'll do 4. Okay. Zoom out. And render again. It's important as somebody who's new to Maya to really start looking at what some of these settings do and how they work for you and what things they change. And rendering and kind of scene post-processing is a good way to learn how most of these options work and affect your scene, which is why I will go through and tweak things and work through things and try to get the best possible image out of it. And then the next thing I do is once I get the best possible image out of it, I will turn that optics renderer back on because it's still going to clean up the rest of that grain that I don't want to see. So we can see that whole render took about 2 minutes, so pretty rough. We're gonna go ahead and save it. This is my snapshot. So we boosted all light samples by 2. All right. So in comparison to our old image, oh, there we go. We can see that we didn't get a whole lot of change there. We got a little bit, but not much. So that's telling me that we need to boost the actual scene samples. So the next thing I'm going to do is boost the scene samples. So we're going to go up to, I think, 12. It may be a bit overkill, but rather be overkill than not. At this point, I'm also going to save because, yeah. And then we're going to hit render and see what happens. One thing I'd like to put here is when you're rendering with a GPU, your sampling is a lot different, so you do have to increase samples pretty heavily. CPU, you have a little bit more control over what samples you're increasing, so if you find that you're getting a lot of speckling in your reflections, you can change your specular samples over your like diffuse samples. So if your diffuse is looking fine, you can actually adjust a lot of those. So the difference between CPU and GPU rendering in Arnold is a little. There's a couple of little things to nitpick there. I like GPU rendering just because it is still generally faster. But if you're working with CPU and you need to actually figure out how you're adjusting those things, remember, just look at each channel and just kind of pick at it. Say, like, if my shiny parts are looking to sit too speckly, I need to go through, adjust my specular. I need to adjust my diffuse if my color's looking kind of speckly. Any number one of those channels you can go through and adjust. Say bump diffuse up to 4 and bump specular up to 6 because we have a shiny object that we're rendering. It really depends on what you're working with, but that's how you're going to want to tweak your CPU renders instead of working with GPU if you're not. Okay, so that render took about 4 minutes. We'll just round it up to 5 minutes. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go boosted samples to 12. And we're going to compare. So if I zoom in here, you can see we have a lot less grain going on. I did clean it up quite a bit. And this is where I'm just going to turn on my AI deimager because, like, I can keep boosting samples, but the AI denoiser will actually help out a lot. So I'll just turn it back on. And then I'm going to save my scene. And then the last thing I'm going to do, just to kind of make this look extra pretty, I'm going to select my fan, and I'm going to hit 3. And I'm going to do it, and I'm going to ignore that error. Now, why did I do this? Because it's just going to make it look that much smoother. I could have tweaked my final smooth a little bit, but at this point, it's a little late in the process to do so. I don't really care. That final smooth will just make it look that much nicer. I'm going to go ahead and hit render. Okay, so we're going to save that snapshot. Look at it. I'm going to say optics turned back on. So keep in mind, there's a couple of things here. Do the samples need to be that high for optics? Absolutely not. You can get a pretty clean image out of optics without the samples being that high. I leave them there just because it gives me the best presentable image possible. So if we zoom in now, you can see that we don't have really any issues in comparison. The only thing that we did lose a little bit on is there's some weird smoothing going on with the blades, but in reality, with as far away as we are, you don't really notice a whole lot of that, so I'm not super concerned about it. If I really wanted to, I could keep cranking samples on everything and playing with this, but I'm looking for a decent image out of this because I'm not trying to do any production-ready anything. Optics is a good way to kind of boost your render speed a little bit and get you better results for your portfolio faster, which is kind of nice. It's also used to just denoise scenes in general. You can play with the other denoisers as well. Sometimes they work better than optics. It just depends on what you're trying to do. But that's it. The tutorial series is over. You guys have made it to the end. The only other thing I want to show you is how to get this image out of Maya if you don't know. So you select your snapshot you're on, go to File, Save Image, and we'll go to my desktop. We'll say New Folder. Name this Fan Final Renders. We're going to do fan underscore final underscore presentation underscore or .jpg or whatever file format you want to save, and then hit save. That's going to give you a JPEG that you can open up. I'll show you that right now. And there is your beautifully rendered fan. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial series. I know I enjoyed making it. I'm hoping to do some more and some more basic tutorials for people who are just fresh into Maya, but I do feel like this was a good starting point for most people. If you guys have questions, please feel free to send them in my Discord or leave them on YouTube. I'll answer them as I come across them. And thank you so much for watching. And if you didn't, please like and subscribe, join the channel, join the group. There will be more tutorials. There'll be more learning. My goal is to educate people on an application that I think is incredible. So if you would like, share the content and share your images with me. Let me see what you guys are making. I would love to see the results you got from this tutorial, and I'll help you where I can. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.